A little over a half century ago, our nation called on the young men and women to help fight communism. During the 18 years from 1955 to 1973, there were over 2.7 million of these young men and women that went and served in Vietnam. Many others served and were stationed in other areas, doing whatever was needed as they were trained for our country. You see, patriotism was alive and well and a big deal back then. After serving our enlistment, many decided to stick around and make a career out of it. Most decided to go back home and pick up the pieces that they left, hoping that it would still be there. And others chose to change branch of services. They liked the military, but they wanted to try a different branch. Our speaker today did kind of all of the above. You see, Bob grew up in a little town just northeast of here called Waldo. He graduated from Gainesville High School in 1962, and by October of that year, he had enlisted in the Air Force. His tour with the Air Force security took him to Mississippi, Texas, Pakistan, Italy, and finally Vietnam. At the headquarters of the 7th Air Force at Operational Intelligence, where he helped map out targets for each day. Bob was discharged in 1970 and wanting to fall back in what he had left. He went to school, attending Lake Sumter Community College and earning degrees from Stetson and the University of Florida in 1975. Then a degree from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in 1978 for a master's in divinity. While in school at Louisville, Kentucky, he also trained Army chaplain candidate at Fort Knox. Bob became full-time pastor at First Baptist Church in Palm Coast and served as staff chaplain with the 301st Army Reserve Field Hospital in Gainesville from 80 to 81. In September of 81, Bob was commissioned a U.S. Navy chaplain on active duty. Bob's tour of duty included Navy and Marine Corps assignments in Florida, North Carolina, the 6th Fleet in the Mediterranean, Washington, D.C., Okinawa, Japan, and Desert Storm. He was with the 2nd Marine Division as battalion chaplain, the 2nd Light Armored Infantry, before retiring at Cecil Field in Jacksonville, Florida. See, that's right. Bob started off as Air Force, then he went to Army, then he went to Navy, and he finally came home to the Marines. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you Lieutenant Commander Chaplain Bob Haynes.
Did you hear that? Yeah. Good morning, Vietnam veterans. This is your day. And good morning, Vietnam era veterans. This is also your day, because without you, nothing would have gotten done. And of course, hello, families and friends. We thank you for your service. We thank you all for being here today to honor our Vietnam veterans. Fortunately, we had to leave our ponchos at home. It quit raining. That's a good thing. The late, great Southern philosopher and humorist Louis Grizzard once remarked that he crammed 4 years of college into 5. Of course, his dog's name was Uga, so we can understand that. Now the question is, for one like me who actually was able to cram 5 years into 4 in undergraduate work, how to cram the massive amount of things that I think about when I think of honoring and serving our veterans, and in this case our Vietnam veterans, in just a few minutes. It's not easy for a chaplain, I guarantee you that, but I'll give it my best shot. Thank Forrest for the introduction, to give some kind of a background to who I am and where I came from with my remarks today. Throughout both my Air Force career, my 4 short years as an Army Reserve chaplain and my time with the Navy and Marine Corps career, I served in support positions to what our armed forces train and prepare to do. It trains and executes combat, and we support personnel provided support for our combat troops. My jobs over my careers were threefold. The first thing I did was provide military, Air Force military intelligence, the form of electronic intelligence in Vietnam and Pakistan, Italy, and other places. The second thing I did in the Air Force for a short period of time was provide administrative services. And thirdly, as a Army Reserve, Navy, and Marine Corps chaplain, provided religious and spiritual ministry. I can tell many, many stories, varied duty stations that I've been, experiences, but we'll save that for another time. Although I served in 2 combat zones, I never personally engaged in combat per se. But based on my experiences, I've entitled my talk, if you want to give it a title, Team Spirit, or We Were There Also. We all served in some capacity. Some were there during the Tet Offensive, which began about 52 years ago in 1968. I arrived in Vietnam a year later on February the 4th, 1969. I was not involved in the heat of the fire that I've seen so many documentaries about, but I provided intelligence and other types of work that made those things happen. Those were tragic days. Though there are usually key players on a team, no one player wins the game. The coach is not supposed to be out on the field scoring touchdowns, but I would say the coach is a key player. It takes team effort and team spirit. The same is true in preparing for and winning a war. There's an old Marine Corps prayer. It goes like this: God our Father, give us all a sense of cooperation. Help us realize that we cannot exist alone. Make us sense our basic unity of purpose. Help us see that individual welfare is intimately tied to the welfare of the whole group, and that the whole group depends upon the well-being of the individual. Help us see this, and above all, help us to live out this insight. Amen. Whether one is an infantryman on the front line of combat or any number of support personnel stationed in the rear area or anywhere else, or even on a base stateside, one's efforts on the team is always of utmost importance. For practical purposes, personally, I'm not interested in engaging in war rhetoric, heroism, who is and who is not a combat veteran, prima donna stuff, grades, rank, and even veterans organization, or which motorcycle to ride. I simply want to focus today on the fact we all served, each one of you, and that we were all and are all important in what we did, how we did it, and where we did it, and in keeping with the occasion during the Vietnam War. Team spirit, we were all there. To put it in perspective, I want to share with you 2 stories from 2 veterans. One from a guy named Jimmy, whom I'm in contact, and by the way, he was a member of Rolling Thunder, fellow biker who rode every time he got a chance, but he could no longer ride. Jimmy wrote this: recently I visited my local credit union to conduct some business. As I sat awaiting my turn, the security guard saw my disabled Vietnam veteran shirt and started a conversation. He was Air Force, which is a good thing. and in Vietnam at the same time as I was. His name was Jimmy also. Then later, as I was waiting in line to pick up some medicine at my local grocery store pharmacy, a gentleman gave me a card with the American flag on it and a silver star patch. He said, "Thank you for your service." I replied, "Thank you, sir, and thank you for your support." Another gentleman behind me asked about my service, and we both shared our being affected by neuropathy and Agent Orange. He had worked at a facility that manufactured the stuff. When I went to pick up and pay for my meds, they had already been paid for by this gentleman. I thanked him, and he said he didn't do anything, but I know he had. Then when I got home, I received a nice letter from the National Disabled American Veterans Headquarters telling me about the significant donation my sister had made in my name and honored all Vietnam veterans. Boys, that brought tears to my eyes. The day was humbled beyond belief. Patriotism is alive and well, so much different than when I first returned from that hellhole. Another letter, another note from a Tan Son Nhut veteran, where I was at in Tan Son Nhut, Saigon, a severely wounded veteran, and the support that he received by support people. Here's what he today, as close as my memory can tell me. I was landing in Vietnam to start my second tour. I was assigned to the 17th Special Operations Squadron. I was going to be an illuminator operator on an AC-119G gunship known as Shadow. From that first day, I started meeting some of the finest men I will ever know. For approximately 103 days, I flew with a crew member of a Shadow gunships throughout southern Vietnam and a little bit of Laos. As near as I can calculate, I flew under just 70 missions. At first, I was a floater and flew with a lot of crews, but I was eventually assigned to a lieutenant, one of the finest pilots I ever knew. Our call sign was Shadow 78. It wasn't just my crewmates. All of the men of the 17th SOS maintenance support office staff all became one big family. And then there were and he calls them cousins, the 6,000 men and women of Tan Son Nhut Air Base that directly or indirectly supported and made it possible for us to fly. April the 28th, 1970 was an abrupt end to my tour of duty. Shadow 78 crashed on takeoff 5 minutes after midnight, 1.5 miles from the runway at Tan Son Nhut. In the next 15 hours, dozens of people stepped in to save my life. First, there was a Huey helicopter crew to pick us up at the crash site. According to the accident report and medical records, I was in surgery at the 3rd Field Hospital in Saigon 10 minutes after the time of the crash. I don't know how many doctors were in that room. I don't know how many nurses were in that room. I don't know how many corpsmen or other medical people were in that room, but they saved my life. It was still April 28th when I medevaced to Camp Zeman, Japan. The doctors, the nurses, the technicians spent weeks helping me to come back from here, where I was, to be a thinking, functional person. The medevac to Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. Again, the doctors, nurses, the corpsmen, the medical staff, all took care of me. A special thanks, and this is interesting, a special thanks to that strange admin chief who showed up at my bedside and administered a special oath officially recognizing me as myself. In that crash in all the hospitals, I was just a patient. I had no ID, no official military status, and this guy right there in my hospital room created a new military ID for me with my picture on it. And I was officially a staff sergeant again. My fiance, who would be my wife in less than 5 weeks, while I was still technically a patient in the hospital, sat by my bedside day by day. We couldn't hold hands or touch each other because I was in quarantine. They didn't know what I had, but it wasn't responding to any of the drugs. It was several weeks before they found and identified it and cured me. When I finally was released from the hospital, my new pride and I went to March Air Force Base in California. A new squadron, a new family. I knew great people, a great group of people that supported me. When I described what I described above are several hundred people I knew and several thousand that I never met. Each one give me a piece of my life back. Each one helped me on a long, long walk home. There's no way I can ever thank them enough. All of you people out there, he says, my family, my friends, my acquaintances, my co-workers, the millions of strangers who have helped me over the years, is there any way possible that I could ever say thank you? Our veterans make us proud to be Americans. Our combat troops, our support personnel, veterans understand profoundly the meaning of service and sacrifice, no matter what their jobs were. Many of you once swore to uphold the security of our country, and I thank you for your service. It is indeed an honor to mark a day like this to give thanks, especially for the sacrifices made for us by our Vietnam veterans, all of them, no matter what they did or where they served. I want to just list a few veteran types today. It's kind of unusual, I know, for a speech at this kind of a situation. But I want to list a few veteran types who we rarely hear about, but who were there and served. Not only in country, but on ships offshore, in nearby countries, as well as in other countries, and in fact here at home, that supported the war effort and were and are important, who, without which the job could not have been accomplished. Here's a list of a few heroes that you rarely hear about. Personnel management people, logistics people, comptrollers, computer systems analysts, nuclear reactor people, air traffic controllers, military intelligence people, radio communications analysis, linguist and interrogator specialists, voice intercept processing specialists, photo mapping specialists, medical illustration technician, still photography, aerial photography, weather observers, electronic intercepts operations analysis, ground and airborne radio operators, radio technicians, mechanics, in-flight refueling specialists, electricians, plumbers, chaplain's assistants, medical supply officers, surgeons, and other specialists all contributed to the war effort. All were important. But the Vietnam War itself will forever be debated by some people. These veterans that I've mentioned, all were there ultimately to give you your freedom and make the choices you have today. If you appreciate these choices that they made so long ago, take the time out when you recognize them and thank them. I'm reminded of a story today I've told before many times. And I heard this the first time while serving as a Marine Corps chaplain. A man with a bird in his hand said to a wise man, "Is this bird dead or alive?" Well, the wise man knew that if he answered the bird's dead, the man could let it go, proving that it was alive. If he answered the bird is alive, the man could crush it to death, proving that the bird was dead. Finally, the wise man said, "The answer is in your hand." That bird is a symbol of your life and the spirit of the humanity in this great country that we live in. You can kill it or you can keep it alive. As we show our flag and our pride today, we remember, gotta hold on to something here. Legs get a little shaky sometimes. We remember that the men and the women of America's armed forces served a great cause during the Vietnam War. Regardless of the politics and the outcome, they followed a great tradition handed down to them by Americans veterans before, and have followed down through today by patriotic troops who now serve. So to you, we simply have a heartfelt message. Thank you, all of you. You, and you, each of you, for your service. Additionally, remember the veterans' families who also paid a price for our freedom, and especially remember the families of our POWMIAs. May God bless you. May God continually bless the United States of America. Veterans, Vietnam veterans, we salute you. And as Forrest Gump would say, that's all I got to say about that. Thank you very much. God bless you.